Hello and welcome to my Week 3 media presentation for MPA 545. So just a little overview of what I'm going to be presenting. So to start off with, I'm going to be talking about Landsberger's characteristics in labor disputes, and this is initially starting from the textbook, as well as my findings from his original article, and provide some information about an article that I found where Landsberger was cited in. So this is coming from Neil Vidmar, and I'll close it off by providing my own insight. So as we've all read, Landsberger's section was very brief in the textbook. It only listed off about it only listed off 5 bullet points, which basically explained in his study, what were important characteristics that were successful in mediators to have. And those characteristics included having an appropriate sense of humor. So this was vague to me, but at the same time, it could be subjective to the situation. Also, to not act unobstructively, to show concern for the other side, so to kind of work with the other side and understand their point of view, being persistent and patient, and having knowledge about the topic that is being mediated. So in Landsberger's article, he focused more, primarily on how he conducted the study to figure out if it was even possible to measure, by utilizing a psychological test to identify desirable traits in mediators. So what he decided to do first was to identify those traits. So he did this by speaking with mediation agencies and asking them to identify good mediators and identifying within those good mediators the good traits that they possess that made them a good mediator. So unlike the textbook, what Landsberger found was that there were 10 traits. So in page 502 of the article, the other 5 traits that were found were that the person had to come in with original ideas. They also had to inspire others to respect authority. They had to have control over their own feelings. They had to be positive and also understand the complexities of a dispute. Yet what the article also added to the textbook was that the study was imperfect. So in the study, it found that, one person can be found to be ranked higher in, to be a good mediator, but in another group, they may be ranked lower. So yes, traits can be identified, but the results can vary. And even Landsberger himself said in his article that the psychological test is not perfect, but it is intended in order to increase in choosing the right person to be a mediator. The article by Neil Vidmar cited Landsberger's findings and elaborated how people can possess traits that seem favorable, but they are bound to change based on the situation. As we know, as humans, we're definitely not robots and we react to situations at times. Even though a favorable trait that was mentioned, so in the characteristics, if you look back, whether it's in the textbook or in actually the article, Landsberger's actual article, if you look back at the traits, a favorable trait would be that, a person has control over their own feelings. So that is an important trait that they identified. Yet Vidmar explained that when the conflict is higher, the more anxious and the more tense that mediators are. So even though Landsberger's tried to come up with a psychological test to identify good mediators, Vidmar did a good job at explaining that it is all situational. But I do think that that was one of the most interesting things that I found out, that when I first read the textbook, it was easy to go with what those 5 bullet points said, but as it elaborated more, it became clear that, it is all situational when it comes to choosing mediators. So what I found is that finding the right mediator is difficult because there are a lot of pieces at play, per se, but I do think that it is a good tool, Landsberger's him trying to come up with a psychological test that will identify those traits. I do think that it's a good tool because I do think that mediators should have, the skills and traits in order to be a good mediator and also build up on it. But at the same time, I do think that it does have to do with motivation and the people around them. So even Landsberger's own Hawthorne effect. For example, if you have a management team that is not present and that is not helpful and unable to answer your questions, you won't feel confident in your own abilities, and you won't be able to utilize those traits because you won't feel confident. But at the same time, if you have a management that is present and able to be present to answer your questions and engaging, then you'll feel confident to utilize your traits to your fullest potential. But I do think that outside sources actually affect one's productivity. And only identifying the traits and the skills is not enough to really build a strong negotiation team or a mediation team. Thank you for listening to my week 3 media presentation, and I look forward to listening to all of your presentations as well.